excited today to have Rudy Sarzo, the bassist who played originally with Ozzy Osbourne, was also with Quiet Riot, Whitesnake, Dio, Yngwie, Malmsteen, currently in the band The Guess Who. It's a kind of a 60s, 70s band. Also, he played with John 5 before John 5 was even John 5. He was John Lowry, and then he went on to be John 5 and played with Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson. So he's worked with some of the most amazing guitarists, singers, drummers, musicians, basically. So he's got a lot of stories to tell, and also it's amazing how he can remember everything. He's had a long career, and if you read his book, Off the Rails, he talks about his time with Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads, and it's not just like he's telling a story and things are kind of fun. I mean, he's got the details down, and he corrects me in this interview several times because I screwed up the details, or maybe the book was not entirely accurate, but he remembers this stuff, and he remembers the details. It's pretty impressive that he can do that, and he's still obviously on top of his game with the bass and everything. So, and he's also got a podcast, which he'll talk about a little bit, and of course, he'll talk about his charity as well. So please welcome Rudy Sarzo. Okay, well, first of all, thank you for coming on my show and taking the time. I really appreciate that. I know we have actually a couple connections. Are you friends with Craig Gass and Brandon Gibbs? I've had both of those guys on my show.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. The good friends, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, because you were actually in a band with Brandon, right? For a short time?
Well, yes and no. I kind of like stepped in and I did a video for a song on the record. That's about it. We never really recorded or played live. I just happened to be on the cover of the album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, so yeah, I'd like to start at the beginning. You were actually born in Havana, Cuba, and you spent the first 11 years of your life there, and that's where you had your first musical experience. So I was reading about that. It was interesting that kids would gather around these metal cars in Cuba and hit the hubcaps or the fender and kind of create a beat and a rhythm. And you called it Afro-Cuban music and Spanish rock. Is that right?
Well, it wasn't really Spanish rock. I mean, we're talking about this is just we really didn't have much of a name for it. It was just a bunch of kids gathering around a car, playing beats, and it was just the traditional music of the time in the country, and it was like the normal thing to do, like people do social media today. That basically was the social media of specific to where I was born, and that was part of the culture, something that just came out of years of I don't know, just years of that cultural being developed, the Spanish and the African, basically embracing each other, and in Spanish and a Caribbean Spanish colonial country, which is a very different experience from a Spanish colonial experience in South America,
right?
Because South America, the natives in the Caribbean were basically wiped out.
Oh.
So, the Indians, the indigenous people, so we didn't have much of a indigenous experience, growing up. It was more cultural to the African and the Spanish, of course.
Right. And then when Fidel Castro came in around 1959, they actually banned all American style music. But then that's when you ended up moving to Florida, right? And then New Jersey, which was even a bigger culture shock, I'm sure. And then is that kind of when you started learning the bass? And there was obviously no YouTube, so you had to find someone to teach it to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the very early days of the British invasion, and I call it specifically the British invasion because, of course, we had the first wave of rock and roll back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until the British invasion that actually brought back the essence of rock and roll coming from England.
Right.
And because basically, the founding fathers of rock and roll, the early pioneers such as Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Jerry Lee Lewis, and Elvis, of course, and they were pretty much out of the picture as far as popular music goes, And
Right.
actually, Buddy Holly had passed away.
Mm.
So by the time that I arrived in 1961 in the United States, it was pretty much middle of the road music. Anything from the Platters to Frankie Avalon, and we had some the Four Seasons. So it wasn't really rock and roll as roots rock and roll that was coming from Little Richard and Chuck Berry. It wasn't really that. It was a little bit more middle of the road, more
Gotcha.
more sanitized music,
Okay.
and it
Yeah.
wasn't until like the Beatles came out and the whole British Invasion movement, with the Stones, that they were actually bringing back the roots of rock and roll, which is R&B and blues influenced music.
Mm-hmm. And then, but you ended up playing in some bands in New Jersey with your brother, I think, and then eventually.
No. I was never in a band in New Jersey. It wasn't until we moved back to Miami.
Or back to Miami, right? Yeah. And then you end up.
That we started.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you end up moving to LA in 77. So talk about those early days. Like, it sounds like you made a lot of sacrifices. I mean, obviously you're really successful now, but back in the early days, it sounded like you were like sleeping on the floor and you kind of had to starve yourself a little bit. Like, it sounds like there was a lot of, that was a long time, right? It wasn't just like a few months.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't the only one. I mean, we were just surviving, trying to get noticed in the music industry.
Right.
I wasn't the only guy who went through that. I was one of everybody. Everybody went through that. I'm trying to say, to be clear, everybody that you heard of in the 80s, guys from Rat and Motley Crue and Dokken and whatever, especially musicians who have moved to LA, not musicians that were native to LA. As a matter of fact, the other guys in Quiet Riot, Randy Rhoads and Kevin Dubrow and Drew Forsythe that I play with, they were native to LA.
Right.
So they were either living at home with their parents or doing some other stuff. But it wasn't like in a situation like me and a lot of the other guys on the strip, that on the Sunset Strip, and that we actually moved from we left home to come to Los Angeles. And that's a little bit of more of a difficult situation because you really don't have any of your family roots to fall back on.
Right. But there must have been something keeping you go. Like, you must have had some sort of sense that you had the ability to make it and you just persevered. You never really gave up. Like, you kept going with it, right?
Well, it was all blind faith.
Yeah.
It was all like, I didn't have a plan B. I didn't want to have a plan B.
Yeah.
I had many plan Bs growing up, and I decided to forego of those for what I really wanted to be, become. It's not about being a musician, because I was a musician. I think anybody is a musician who, even if you don't make a living from playing music, you're still a musician. You play an instrument, you know. But I wanted to be a professional,
right?
Recording and touring musician.
So I think your first big break, you actually were trying to go to see Van Halen at the Whiskey A Go Go, and it was sold out. So then you ended up at the Starwood, and you saw a band called Quiet Riot, and you struck up a friendship with the singer. And then later, he called you and asked you to audition. And then I think that was, were you in New Jersey at that point? Is that correct? I think, anyways, you flew out to LA, right?
Yeah. But to call it a friendship with Kevin at that moment it's a stretch, because have you ever had anything in your life that was actually life changing?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Experience.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure you remember a lot about it.
Right. No, there's like so many. It's not just like one or two incidents. It's like so many. But the first one that you talk about, that's like another big life-changing one, is, you fly out, you're in that version of Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads as the guitarist. Then he leaves to join Ozzy, but then eventually he recommends you to play with Ozzy. So this was so fascinating to read this part where Sharon Osbourne calls you and asks you to audition, and you actually turned her down because you were in another band, Angel, at the time, right?
Yeah.
Is that just kind of, it's like a loyalty thing? Is that just how you are? Like you're a very loyal person and you don't want to.
Oh yeah. I never walk out of a situation. I never leave people stranded. You know, even in a situation like, you know, I was sleeping on the floor. I wasn't making any money
Right.
as a member of Angel. You know, I was just another starving musician in LA that happened to be in the band called Angel, who at the time did not have a record label, and they were struggling to get signed to another label. You know, it was no real promising, you know, future.
Right.
But nevertheless, I was in the band, so I wasn't about to like jump ship immediately. I had to really think about it. And it was a situation like, you know, after I got a call from Sharon and I told her no thanks because I'm in another band and hung up the phone and yeah, but you know, you have to put things into perspective. First of all, when we talk about Sharon Osbourne today, everybody knows Sharon.
Sure. Yeah.
And you know, 40 something years later, it's in our, especially people that have never met her, they have a certain image about her, you know, a very powerful, successful woman, or a married and managing one of the most recognizable and successful individuals in the entertainment industry, Ozzy Osbourne.
Right.
Well, it wasn't like that 40 years ago. Ozzy, you know, did not have the profile that he has today, because nobody could really, you know, predict the future.
Right.
Back in 1981, and Sharon was, you know, she was just Ozzy's manager, and not even Ozzy's manager. She was the daughter of Ozzy's manager, who happened to be taking care of his business for the company, Jet Management. So, you know, it wasn't like, oh my goodness, I got a call from Sharon Osbourne and blah blah blah. No, it was like, there's this person that called me on behalf of Ozzy because Randy recommended me, and basically, no, thank you, I'm in another band, you know, so.
But Ozzy was still a pretty big, he has been in Black Sabbath. I mean, he was still a pretty big name at that time, right?
Yes and no. You know, Black Sabbath, all of a sudden, before that happened, already had a singer named Ronnie James Dio, and they were kicking butt without Ozzy.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't like, oh yeah, Ozzy Osbourne, you know, the guy who's got, you know, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of the Madman. No, those records, they were not on the radio at the time.
Yeah.
I had never heard the record. I knew nothing about the music. All I knew was that my best reference was that Randy Rhoads was in the band.
Yeah, and he was your good
That's
friend.
it.
Yeah, but
That's
so eventually,
you know,
you did come to your senses.
Friend, I'm sorry?
You did come to your senses when then Ozzy himself called you, and then you did
Ozzy
take
called
the
me,
job.
Yeah, Ozzy called me the next day and asked me to come down just because Randy kept insisting, you know, Rudy's the guy you're looking for. Basically, they have less than 10 days before the beginning of the tour, and it all came down to trust. They didn't know any of these people that were auditioning for the gig. They needed a bass player that not only could play, but they could trust to be in the bus traveling with Ozzy and not be a bad influence on Ozzy.
Right.
You know,
that's a big part of it.
And Randy kept saying, well, you know, Rudy's the guy. So, you know, thanks to Randy's recommendation, I got the gig.
Right.
Of course, I had to learn how to play songs immediately because I never heard them before live, you know. And Randy came over that morning of the audition, which was the following day, and he taught me the songs basically, and I had to like remember them within 10 minutes, and then play them with Ozzy.
Right.
You know?
So then, in less than 24 hours, you went from sleeping on the floor of that apartment to sleeping in a king size bed in Ozzy's mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Like, that's a pretty cool story.
Well, actually, it was not Ozzy's mansion.
Oh.
It was Don Arden Sharon's father,
Oh, okay.
who owned the mansion. He was he owned Jet Records and Jet Management, and actually he was also managing Air Supply Electric ELO, and I believe during that time on and off with Black Sabbath, because he at one point he was managing both bands.
Gotcha.
The Ozzy and Black Sabbath. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, wow, that's pretty cool. And then obviously, I mean, there's, like I said, people can read more, but there's a couple incidents I want to talk about from the book. Obviously, one of the most famous incidents in rock and roll history was January 20th, 1982 in Des Moines, Iowa. And you were not only on stage with Ozzy when this happened, but you actually, I think, in reading the book, you kind of instigated this. So someone throws like a crumpled up black thing on the stage, and you pointed it out to Ozzy, but then he grabbed it and put it in his mouth, and that turned out to be a bat, and he bit the head off. Can you describe your recollection of this incident?
Yeah, it was very simple. Somebody throws something on stage, and it looked pretty weird. And Ozzy's standing right next to me, and I kind of like, I'm headbanging. I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't stop playing. I did not. I just kept playing. But while I'm doing that, I look at Ozzy and I'm playing with my bass to the thing on the floor. Then I just kept playing. I personally did not even see him put it in his mouth. Right? I just kept playing. I did not see him spit it out into the pit. No, because I was busy playing. We're all playing.
Yeah.
It was not until the show ended and I see on the side of the stage there's an ambulance waiting, and they put Ozzy in the ambulance and they take off. That's it. And then I go, what the hell happened? Then they tell me, what actually happened. And then we took the bus over to the hospital emergency where Ozzy was being treated for possible rabies, and they gave him rabies vaccine, and then they gave him some vials of monkey serum that we had in the refrigerator of the tour bus. And we traveled with that, and he was administered, every day monkey serum vaccine.
And you actually took pictures of him getting the rabies shots, right? Or that's what you said in the book.
No, I didn't say I took pictures. The tour manager borrowed my camera.
Oh, okay.
But I never left the tour bus, and they went inside and took pictures of Ozzy getting the rabies shots, which they used as publicity shots.
Okay. Yeah, because I think he thought it was fake. Like he thought, it was like rubber or something like that, but it wasn't fake. It was a real actual bat, and he really did have to get the rabies shots.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So another crazy story that I read in the book was there was a time that Ozzy was drunk, and there was a waitress and she wanted to cut Ozzy off from ordering more drinks, and this pissed Sharon Osbourne off so bad that she went and pissed in a glass and then threw it in the waitress's face. That was a true story too?
Yeah, and this is what happened. Sharon claimed that she pissed on the glass.
Mm-hmm.
She pissed in the glass. Now, we can't tell if it was piss or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes people make things up,
right?
Just to get, be dramatic. But that's what she says she did. And whether it was real or not, I don't know. Because that's the way things were back then.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of crazy stories like that are obviously, even more in the book and such. But so, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's really sad. Obviously, Randy passes away, and then you're kind of questioning your future with the band and Ozzy's heavy drinking. So you decide that you're going to go rejoin Quiet Riot, right?
I wasn't kind of. I was completely, thinking about how to find my joy of playing music again. It wasn't like kind of.
Yeah, it was okay. You had decided you wanted to get out. So again, you being the nice guy that you are, you ask Sharon if she needs your help to fill in for the shows until replacement basis is found. But she just said nobody leaves Ozzy and then hangs up the phone on you, right? Is that pretty much what happened?
Yeah, but that's that's typical of people when things like that happen. You know.
Were you scared to make that phone call? I'm assuming, right? I mean, it seems like I would be afraid of, or were you just like,
no. I mean, it's a phone call that it's a hard phone call because not being scared. It's a matter of you know, I had no other reason to leave the band except that because Randy had passed away and he wasn't there anymore, and the traumatic experience of being present during the crash.
Mm-hmm.
We were shell shocked. We were traumatized, and
mm-hmm.
all of us that experienced that. So it was kind of like, how am I gonna find joy in making music again?
Mm-hmm.
And my way of dealing with that at that time, because you know people grow and they understand things about life, you know, with time. The only way that I could deal with that at the time was to actually move on. And you have to take into consideration, I moved on to a band that nobody wanted in Los Angeles. You know that record that went to number one?
Right.
That became the first debut metal record to go to number one?
Metal Health.
Just a few months ago, we couldn't find a manager to manage the band with that record already done and ready with a release date. Nobody believed that metal was going to come back, or, you know, hard rock, whatever you want. They were calling it back in the day. You know, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot, we were all labeled metal bands back then. Of course, metal has different faces today, but that was considered metal, you know.
Yeah.
And case in point, you know, we went on tour with Scorpions, we went on tour with Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, you know, bona fide metal bands. You know, Judas Priest was another band that we toured with, and you know, it was labeled metal was labeled very different back then than it is today. You know?
Yeah, it was just because back then it was just heavy metal. There wasn't this like they didn't call it hair metal or any of that kind of thing.
Yeah, or dark metal, death metal, speed metal, you know, whatever. You know, there weren't different categories. There was just metal, you know. And so it wasn't like oh yeah, sure, I'm going to leave Ozzy and join this band and we're going to have a great record. And you know, no, it was like that. It was like the only reason why I did it is because I went back to playing, you know, with Kevin, who I already been playing with in Quiet Riot, and Dubrow, you know, when he had the band after Quiet Riot, right before I joined Ozzy, I was living with him and playing in Dubrow whenever Dubrow played around town, you know, just to make some money so I could pay the rent.
Yeah. So you had no idea this was going to be a huge hit. The Metal Health. I mean, it was a monster success.
I mean, it was. Yeah, I mean, not only us, but you know, the genre of music alone. Forget about the Metal Health being a success. Nobody in Los Angeles could see at the end of the tunnel that eventually, not only Quiet Riot, but everything else that was coming. You know, whether it was British metal, the new wave of British metal that I was already a part of with Ozzy, but I knew that because I was already touring in England and Europe, and I knew what was coming. You know, Motorhead, Motorhead was on our bill in '81, so was Def Leppard, you know, and then UFO, and you know, bands like that. So it was like, yeah, there's this movement of metal that's really, you know, already playing arenas, but the labels in the United States are not really paying attention to that. They're still, you know, looking at new wave and punk, you know, okay, that's fine. But this is coming. And what it took was actually MTV.
Yeah.
It took MTV to actually start playing metal, you know, Def Leppard and Quiet Riot, of course, and then later on Motley Crue and Rat and, you know, Docket and everybody else that Twisted Sister, you know, that came along and that solidified, the metal as coming back. Maiden, everybody started getting into the MTV video scene.
Yeah, and you guys had a lot of success. In fact, and you were actually named in 1983, you were voted the best bassist in Circus Magazine. Did you like getting those kinds of like awards? Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, there's actually no award for one of the best bassists. You're either the best bassist or you're not.
Right.
And yeah, it's a popularity contest. That's all it is.
Yeah. So then with the I guess sounds like the problem with what happened with Quiet Riot with you leaving was, I don't know if this is true, but it said something. I read something about that Kevin was he's basically talking shit about too many other bands, and that kind of bothered you, and that's part of the reason that you left Quiet Riot. Is there truth in that?
Well, you don't leave one of the biggest bands in the world because something is kind of bothering you.
Right. So it really bothered you.
It became a problem. It was a problem. Right. It was an issue, and there was nothing I can do about it because his mindset was that there's no such thing as bad publicity. Oh. So that's how he rolled with it, and so I moved on.
But you stayed in touch with Frankie, so I did want to bring up him. I know he's struggling right now with his cancer. Have you been in touch with him? He was the best man at your wedding. You guys are still really good friends. Are you still in touch with him right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is he doing okay? Because I thought that was really cool that despite having that cancer, he's going out and he's still wanting to play music. That's like still a very important thing.
That's
for
what
him
he
to do.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is the challenge. That he's fighting incredibly, heroically. He's my hero. I mean, but Frank has been my hero for a long time, even before this unfortunate cancer came about. We've been friends way before we played in Quiet Riot. He's the drummer that taught me what my role as a bassist in a rhythm section was all about, because I had no concept of it prior to that. Prior to playing with him in 1972, we met on my birthday in 1972 at the hangout in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at the time, called the Flying Machine. And we started playing back then. So it wasn't until like 10 years later that we were actually, in Quiet Riot together.
That's so cool. You got to play with it sounds like you were friends with either before or you became friends with a lot of these people that you've played with over the years.
Yeah.
And then, and so then you joined Whitesnake and you were with them for a while. You didn't actually get to play on the song Here I Go Again, but is that you in the music video?
Yeah, that's the whole band. The only person that actually played on that song on the record was Adrian Vandenberg. He did the solo on that record. And everybody else got together after the record was finished.
Did you know at that time that would be, I mean, that video is an iconic piece of 80s history. Did you know at the time that this was going to be a huge music video, or is that another one where you just had kind of going in blind there?
I think you're giving my psychic abilities a lot of... No, I wish I had a crystal ball and I knew all the stuff. But then again, I'm just happy that I was there for all the wonderful things. Nobody knows.
Right.
Not even the record company knows. They just, they're just hoping for the best. They're hoping that what you believe in, everybody else will come to appreciate it.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then you were Whitesnake, and then you've been in so many bands. You were in a band called Sun King. Now, I found this really interesting because there was a guitarist named John Lowry, who obviously more people know him as John 5. He played with Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. Hugely famous. I guess, again, I'm giving you credit with your psychic abilities, but do you take credit in discovering him and seeing him play in that band Alligator Soup, or what stood out about him? Because didn't you pick him to be in the band?
Yeah, he was our guitar player. No, Johnny, there's certain things that are just so obvious.
Yeah.
You know, and and so and it's so obvious that certain people just have that X factor about them.
Ah.
And after you've been doing this for a while, you start to recognize who does and who doesn't. And when you run into somebody uh, with the X factor, such as John Five, it's a no brainer.
Wow. Yeah, because
I,
he.
was, I wasn't the only person who thought that John Five had the potential to become that John Lowry had the potential of becoming you know John Five.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know,
So
and
he was well
and
known around the scene at that, just not nationally, obviously.
well, you look at Randy Rhoads. I mean, Randy Rhoads. You have to become a local hero before you become a global legend.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing. The word got around about John Five around town, and the only way to do that is to let people know that you exist and
Mm-hmm.
that you have this specific talent. Just like Randy did when he was playing locally in Los Angeles before he ever left LA.
Yeah. Wow. And then you played with you played with so many amazing. You played with Yngwie Malmsteen in 2004. One thing that stands out to me about is just how fast he can play, and he just really shreds that guitar. Is it hard to keep up with somebody like that? Or I mean, I know obviously you're playing the bass and not the guitar, but it's still, I mean, is there some guitarists that are more difficult to play with than others?
It all depends on the tempo of the song, how fast
Mm-hmm.
the song is.
Okay.
You could be playing a ballad with a shredder, and it's a
Yeah.
ballad.
Yeah. Well, and I guess when he's soloing, you're not going to do a bass solo, but is he maybe the second best guitarist you've ever worked with next to Randy Rhoads, or who would you say is second best? Because you've worked with Steve Vai, Steve Stevens, Zach Wild, John Five.
I've never worked with Steve Stevens.
Oh, you did? I thought you had the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, or maybe you didn't actually
Well,
play with
well,
him.
that's not working with. That's not being in a band
Oh,
with.
okay,
That's
gotcha.
basically anything that happens at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp is an isolated, event.
Gotcha.
It's not like you're in a band called Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you had time with you were in Dio's band for a little bit, and you eventually joined up with him. How did he compare to other singers you've worked with before? Because now, I mean, again, you've worked with Dio, Ozzy, David Coverdale.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't in Dio for a little bit. I was in the band from 2004 until he passed away in 2010. I was his bass player, so
Right.
that's like 6 years, and that's not really a little bit.
Right. Oh no, that's a long
But
time. Right.
yeah, well, I mean, it's a good portion of my life, 6 years in a band.
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
And we would tour every year, even if it was or in the band Heaven and Hell. We would tour every year, and it was an incredible experience. I got to learn so much from Ronnie. Say, how to be a better human being, a better musician, better everything. It just I wouldn't be who I am today without having the experience of working with Ronnie and Dio.
Right. And you've credited your success with your ability to adapt, like being able to join a band and fit into that band. As you said, you're joining the band isn't joining you. And you've played everything from jazz and Cuban music to full on speed metal. So clearly you can adapt. Do you think that is hard for a lot of other musicians to do?
Yeah, you know what? I appreciate all kinds of music, jazz and Afro-Cuban and all that. But I know what I am. I am really I don't know, a classic metal. And I say classic because I'm not really, I am not a new metal musician. I am a classic metal bass player. By that, I mean somebody who performed with Ozzy and, back in the day, that original Ozzy Osbourne music, and from the first two records, and got to play with Dio, and got to play with Whitesnake, and Quiet Riot, and so on.
Yeah.
That's what I am at my best.
Right.
I can play other stuff, and I love other music, but me, who I am, my identity personally, and from the bottom of my heart, when the beast is unleashed from within me, that's the music. That's the music that gets the beast out of me.
Absolutely. No, you're great at it. You also said, as you said earlier, trust is you said it's even more important than musical ability. So do you think there are a lot of talented musicians that didn't make it because their attitude and their lack of trust, like people don't want to trust them, even though they're really talented musicians?
Yeah. I mean, nobody, no, I mean, you will get a gig if you're an incredible musician. If you would lose the gig if you're an incredible musician, but you cannot be trusted.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So, I mean, you're widely known as one of the nicest guys in rock. Do you feel like the nature of playing the bass requires you to have kind of a more down-to-earth and easygoing disposition? Because it seems like it's hard to be really ego-driven when you're playing the bass. I mean, unless you're Les Claypool or Flea and just taking the center stage. Like you're okay kind of being in the back, right?
Yeah. Well, I've never really. If it would have been okay for me to be in the back, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now because you would have never noticed me.
Well, not
Nobody
the back,
would have ever noticed me.
Right. But you're not the front man when you're playing with Ozzy or Whites. I mean, you're not, that's what I'm, you're okay not being the front man. I guess you're still on the stage,
course,
obviously.
But neither was Tommy Aldridge and Randy Rhoads. It's the sum of all parts that really make even a band that is named after one person.
Right.
Take Van Halen. David Lee Roth doesn't have the last name Van Halen, but he's David Lee Roth. Even Michael Anthony. Everybody knows who these guys are.
True.
It doesn't matter. It's the sum of all parts that really make up, a greatness of any band. A band,
Right. No.
And I'm talking about in the traditional sense, not in the modern sense of when artists go up on stage nowadays and there's not even a band. They just, it's just them up there and with some pre-recorded music.
Yeah, and one of the bands that you were in was that Mars Project, and it looked like you had been credited with a lot of the songwriting duties on that one. Is there other? It seems like there on the other bands that you're in.
No. Sometimes you're in situations, and to be completely honest with you, the bulk of the music was written by Tony McAlpine.
Oh, okay.
But it's kind of like, let's say, taking Van Halen again. Van Halen, it's a band where all the musicians traditionally, in the first incarnation of the band, they split the composition royalties equally.
Right.
But you can tell that where that music came from. It's mainly guitars. The music from Eddie and the vocals from Dave. The lyrics. I mean, it was very unique blend of like bonehead lyrics with like this incredible virtuoso guitar playing, which is actually, to me, is what definitely made it work. Because it was kind of, lyrics were very working class, and the music was virtuoso. It brought the lyrics brought the music down to earth and made it accessible.
Yeah. So is songwriting, is that like not something that you're really interested in, or do you have song ideas that you pitch the band? No. I'm
really interested in songwriting, of course, but when you're talking about guitar-driven music, I am not at the level of a Tony McAlpine to tell Tony, "Hey, play your guitar like this."
No, that's true.
You can't do that.
Right.
I don't even know of other guitar players that can actually tell Tony what to play.
Right. Yeah. So, and you've worked with so many musicians, like I said, and your reputation is great. But is there any musicians that you've worked with that were hard to work with, or maybe talented musicians but just difficult personalities? I mean, I don't know if you want to say their names, but
Well, I'll put it this way: some were harder than others, but
okay,
it was all a very. No, I won't even say that. No, listen, it's you have to understand people and not let their personality get in the way of their music. Sometimes ego is just a shield for somebody not being confident, even though they might have great musical knowledge, but there's something happened along the way in their journey that made them lose confidence in themselves, even though they might be incredible musicians. So sometimes they use ego to protect themselves.
Oh, interesting. Well, speaking of egos, do you have any opinion on the Motley Crue reunion? Because I did read in your book that you went to see them back in the day, and you actually recommended them to tour with Ozzy back in the day.
No, I didn't. No, I did not.
Oh.
No, I did not, because I was not in any position. Because it's like I want to keep the gig,
Yeah.
and it is like for me to tell at that time in my career, I hadn't done anything. I
Right.
had no resume. I had nothing. All it was like I'm just very happy to be playing in the band, because it's not like Rudy can't, he before he joined Ozzy, he did this and this and this and that. No, nothing. All I did was play in Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads in Los Angeles, and that was it. So I had no resume, and I, and at the time, I don't even think Motley Crue had actually released the album yet.
Shout
They
at the
were
Devil.
just, I think they might have had the EP,
Okay.
and it wasn't like these guys. That's the job of agents, and that's the job of record company people and management. You know, the business side, especially at that time in
Yeah.
1981, to actually make a decision: who are we going to have as an opening band?
Oh, gotcha. But they
Now,
did they?
that did not keep that will never keep bands from saying, "Hey, dude, can you tell so and so,
Oh.
that we're looking for, to open up for you guys or whatever." Yeah, everybody does that
Oh,
at
okay.
all times.
So yeah, it
Whether it's
was
going to
more just
materialize
yeah.
or not, yeah, that's
Okay.
completely different.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's more or less things. They were asking you, and you're like, yeah, sure, but like it's hard to pitch that.
No, I never say sure. I usually say like, okay, I'll listen to what they got to say and
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
okay, yeah.
that's cool. All right. So I always like to end with a charity. Is there a charity or organization that you're currently working with that you want to promote here?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them, and they, I would say animal rescue.
Animal rescue. Okay.
Um, Animal rescue, and just make sure that uh, if you're looking to bring a pet into your life,
Mm-hmm.
just go to an adoption center. There's plenty of pets available, especially during this the holiday season.
Right. That's great. Well, Rudy, you've certainly had an amazing career from the early days in Quiet Riot and Ozzy to now you have a podcast. I think do you have a do you still do the podcast, The Dash and the 6 Degrees of Sarzo on the Monsters of Rock Radio?
Yeah, well, see, that's not a podcast. That's an actual radio broadcast.
The Dash
There's
is a podcast, though,
no
right?
the dash. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
was doing the dash. The dash is what got the attention of the CEO, or Holland Hendrickson,
Okay.
of Monsters of Rock Radio and the cruises and all that stuff.
Okay.
It's what got me noticed that
Yeah.
I was doing a radio thing. I mean, a podcast. And then he asked me, "Would you like to bring your podcast, bring it to Monsters of Rock Radio, but not as a podcast? It's an actual broadcast."
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, and then do you have any other future music plans? I know you play the bass with the band Guess Who, which is another amazing rock band.
I play the bass with a Guess Who. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The bass guitar to be actually, I don't want to confuse people out there thinking I'm with a stand-up bass and
You did play that though
playing
once,
jazz.
didn't you? You have tried that, right? I thought I read that too somewhere, that you tried the stand-up bass before.
No, I've never owned one.
Okay.
Never owned one because I could never bring it home. I couldn't fit it in the car. So,
well, check
that
out.
thing is huge.
Yeah, check out Rudy's radio show. Check out his book, Off the Rails. See him perform the Guess Who. And you're on all the social media, the Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, all that stuff, I think, right?
I'm on the interweb, yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Anything else you'd like to promote at this time, or?
No, I just want to wish everybody a wonderful, joyous Christmas, Thanksgiving season, and a blessed 2020.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rudy. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being on my show.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay. That was Rudy Sarzo, bassist for Ozzy Osbourne, Whitesnake, Quiet Riot, Dio. He's been in so many bands and currently in the Guess Who. So check out all that stuff that we talked about. Check out his social media. You could read more about his story with Ozzy and Randy Rhoads in his book Off the Rails, which is a really fascinating book. I haven't finished the whole thing, but you just open any page, there's a million crazy stories in that thing. So check that out. I'm on all social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. So follow me and have a great holiday.